Yeah, I think we're ready to go, Gretchen.
My screen shows we're almost there.
Okay, I'll wait for your signal.
All right, we're there. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gretchen. I want to welcome everybody to the second meeting of the Community Police Performance Audit Steering Committee. I am Jody Sherwood and I'm the chair of the committee. This is our second meeting. Much has happened since our last meeting that we held on October 22nd, which was our kickoff. And at that meeting, we talked through our expectations of our work. In between that time and now, we have a new police chief, Trevor Womack. He'll be starting, I believe, in December. And if you want to learn more about Chief Womack, you can go to the city's website. I think also some of the interview process is also on the city's YouTube channel, and you can learn a little bit more. I think Chief Moore's last day is December 1st, and hopefully between now and then we can take every opportunity to continue to say thank you to him for his service. I know that he has quite the long tenure here for the city, and we really appreciate his work. And so before we get started, I will first call the roll to get us started. And so, and as we go through our agenda today, if for any reason we have to vote or go around the room for questions, I'll just go down the list of committee members so folks can anticipate who might be up next. But again, thank you for being here. So let's get started. Anne Marie Banfield. Don't see Anne Marie, I'll come back. Deputy Chief Burke. Not sure, I can't see everybody.
No, I'm sorry. Did you catch that? I'm here.
Thank you. Ashley Hamilton.
Yes, good evening. I'm here.
Great. Hi, Ashley. Levy is here. He is off camera. I think that means he's not also has volume. Do you know, Gretchen?
He has thumbs.
Thumbs. Excellent.
Share with us. So.
Okay, but I do know that Levy is here. Kathleen Johnson.
Kathleen Jonathan.
Oh, thank you.
Here. You're welcome.
We will fix that on the agenda.
Thank you.
And Casey Kopcho.
I'm right here.
Great. Hi, Casey. And Cindy. Thought I saw Cindy. Lena Sauer.
Yes.
Great. Hi, Cindy. And Scotty Noning from Salem. Please.
Nouning, I'm here.
Say it again, Scotty. I think I did that last time.
Nouning.
No, Nouning.
Yeah, it's just like Downing, but with an in. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Oni.
I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, great. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. One more time for Anne Marie, and I suppose if she comes on, we'll keep watching for her.
I'm not sure that we should expect her. Her voicemail indicated that she was out of the office.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Courtney. And since we're doing introductions, Courtney, can you help us go around the table with the city staff that are with us tonight?
Sure, I can. With us is Debbie Aguilar. Debbie, you want to?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Gretchen Bennett.
Hi, everybody. Oh, and I have to leave early tonight. I'm going to log off about 15 minutes early.
Thank you. Myself, I'm here, and Kirsten Madigan is in another meeting, and she's going to be joining us just a little bit late. And Natasha Zimmerman is here.
Good evening.
Thank you. Bob, you're listed as Deb Kirby, which is kind of throwing me all the time, but I appreciate it.
I've been assuming that identity all week, so it just I'll go with Deb, but you know.
Would you mind, Bob, introducing your team?
Sure. So with me is Brian Kaufman and Ricky Godey and myself, Robert Haas.
Great. Thank you to everyone for being here today. I wanted to real quickly just walk through the agenda and then we'll get started. To kick us off today, I've asked Natasha Zimmerman from the City Attorney's Office just to talk through a little bit of the Robert's Rules of Orders. At some point in the process, well, actually today, as we approve minutes, we'll need to go through the Robert's Rules of Orders process. And I thought it might be good for a good refresher for all of us. Also being on the Zoom call is an interesting aspect to that. So Natasha's going to review some of that with us today. And then we are going to approve our minutes from our kickoff meeting, and you should have received those on email. And when we get to those, if you haven't found them on your email, we can help you out with that during the process, hopefully. And then Bob and his team that he introduced today from Hilliard Hines are going to walk us through their initial observations so far and talk to us about how the audit is going. And then we as a group, we're going to go through the goals and objectives, talk through what we saw last time as far as our scope of work, and just make sure that all the representatives that we want to make sure are included in the conversations are mentioned and given to Hilliard Hines staff, and we'll talk through that some more in our next steps. So if there isn't anything else, I think I will turn it over to Natasha to get us started.
Okay, let's see if I can do this. Yep. Sorry, I think I need to go back to the beginning. Sorry. Okay, can everyone see a PowerPoint presentation? Maybe just a nod or two? Okay. Okay, and so I'm just kind of going to quickly go through the basics. If anyone hasn't been involved in meetings that use parliamentary procedures, let me know if you want me to go slower or if you want to have some a personal phone call to go through things that I might kind of speed through a little bit. But Jody did ask me to review just the basics of parliamentary procedure. So a couple of notes for the purpose behind using parliamentary procedure, especially in a meeting where we have people in different locations and maybe not able to see the screen showing all of the participants at one time, is to ensure that every voice is heard during meetings, especially as we're making decisions. So parliamentary procedure can provide a structure, a format to facilitate meetings and to make sure every voice is heard, protects the minority voices. It's also the city's default for any public meeting to ensure public participation. So when you are making decisions on behalf of the city, asking that you use parliamentary procedure during that decision making. So some basic principles of parliamentary procedure is that a quorum is required to make decisions. Typically that's a majority, and since we don't have any bylaws to the contrary, that will be a majority of your committee in this instance. A motion is necessary to initiate a discussion of a decision. So if you're just talking about a subject matter, that's fine, but if it's an actual decision that you need to take a vote on, you'll need a formal motion. And we require a second, or typically parliamentary procedure requires a second for that motion to then initiate discussion. You can only consider one motion at a time, so you can't have 2 or 3 outstanding motions, with the exception that you can have an amendment to the motion, and there can be 2 open amendments of the motions at any time. And when I say that, the first amendment would be of the underlying or main motion. The second amendment is actually an amendment of the amendment. So it can get a little convoluted, and that's why the rules only allow for 2 amendments open at a time. And then when you vote, if you've got amendments open, you vote on the most recent amendment first, then that amends the original amendment, which then amends the main motion, and then you vote on the main motion. Only one member should speak at any time, and they should be recognized by the chair prior to speaking, so that it's clear from the record who's speaking, who is authorized to speak at that time. Let's see. And generally, a majority vote of the individuals present is required to decide any matter. So the basic procedure is that you make a motion. I move to adopt staff recommendation, or I move to adjourn the meeting. You have a second. The second does not need to be recognized by the chair to make the second. If you're making the second but don't really like the motion, you can state, I'm seconding for the purpose of opening the discussion. That's not required, but some people like to kind of get their opinion out there before they can really speak on the motion. If there's not a second, the chair might call a couple of times for a second, and without a second, then the motion dies and there's no vote taken. Once seconded, the motion belongs to the body and it can't actually be withdrawn by the maker, even if the party who seconded the motion agrees with withdrawing it. It would require a vote up or down by the body as a whole. So debating and voting on motions. The maker of the motion gets the first opportunity by the chair to discuss or address their motion. Members should be recognized by the chair before they can speak. And again, that's for record purposes to make sure we know who said what. Certain minutes are really minute by minute minutes, and so it matters who says what in the record taking. And if no one wants to speak, then the chair can call the question or call for the vote. In voting, the chair should restate the motion so it's clear what everyone is voting on, and then note all those in favor say aye or all opposed say no. And I think as you've done the roll call vote, Jody, that's what I would recommend given the forum that we've got, rather than everyone just speaking at once, just to make sure our record's clear how many are voting in favor or against any motion. All members present must vote unless you have a conflict of interest you've already disclosed. Or there's another specific legal reason you have to abstain, but otherwise you should vote. And then the chair shall announce the vote and the action that will proceed after that. In the event of any kind of tie, the motion fails. So common motions are the main motion. We're going to take this action. A motion to amend. Again, there can only be two amendments open at any time. Sorry, I've got growling dogs behind me. And a motion to amend does also require a second, just like your main motion does. And then a motion to defer to a certain time is, if your debate's going long on a motion, you could have a secondary motion to defer debate or to move this question to another meeting. Okay, so we're going to play a quick true and false, and then I'll let you get back to the other substantive things. And let me see if I can get to... So I'm not going to be able to see, so you guys are just going to have to unmute your screens and yell out. So first one is the purpose of a main motion is to present an item of business for consideration and action by the body. True or false? Don't be shy.
True.
True. Great. If an amendment is proposed to a motion that requires a 2/3 vote, the amendments also require a 2/3 vote.
False.
It's actually true. So unless your rules define otherwise. And we didn't cover that, so I'm not going to take any points off for that one. A substitute motion replaces the original motion.
No.
So this one is actually, it kind of depends, but it can be true. So again, I didn't cover it, so I'm not going to take any points off, Jody, but a substitute motion could replace. So if you have a motion that was made, like we want to pass a tax of 5%, and in the discussion, a recognized party says, moves to substitute a motion that the tax should be 3% rather than 5%. If that is approved, it actually is an amendment. A substitute motion is kind of a fancy name for amending. It's amending the whole motion rather than just a portion of the motion. So actually it could substitute if passed the original motion. But you actually then have to vote on it twice. Once to substitute and then once to agree with the now substituted motion. Really anal, nerdy stuff, but that's what, as a lawyer, I get to talk about. So, okay, once seconded, a motion may be amended or withdrawn by the maker if the second agrees.
Natasha, can we go back to the last one really quick? Because there
Sure.
was a question from
Oh.
Casey.
Sure.
He was asking if it's okay to make friendly amendments or ask for unanimous consent.
So friendly amendments can be made as long as the whole body agrees that so first you would ask, a friendly amendment is something that perhaps in discussion you realize that the motion is less than clear what you meant to say. So you would ask the original moving party, Casey, would you accept a friendly amendment? And then you ask the body as a whole if that amendment is acceptable. And normally it doesn't actually take a formal vote to say yes or no, but if you're kind of getting nods of approval, then the chair can move forward with the friendly amendment. So yes, it's slightly different than a substitute motion because it actually just provides more context generally to the main motion. Casey, is that enough or do you want to talk more about that?
I was just thinking through all the things that come up in our other proceedings. And that's one that gets frequently used to enhance an original motion when it's less than clear. So
right, absolutely. And that can happen and can be very useful. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the once seconded. A motion may be amended or withdrawn by the maker if the second agrees. Any thoughts on that? So once a motion is seconded, it now belongs to the body as a whole and doesn't belong to the moving party anymore. And so even though there's some kind of contrary rules, because as I just answered Casey's question, I said, oh, if you have a friendly motion, you would friendly amendment, you would ask the moving party. But technically, once it is seconded, the motion itself belongs to everyone. And so you can't withdraw it or amend it just by talking to the second. It now belongs to the body, and so they vote and agree as a whole to amend it. Okay, two more. A motion to amend may be amended. True or false? Don't be shy.
True.
True. So you can have two open motions, two open amendments. The main motion is open, a motion to amend, and then a motion to amend the amendment. And then that's, so technically 3 total motions open. And then, so then I just told the answer to the last one. An amendment to an amendment is not amendable. True or false? So it's true. You can only have 2 open amendments, and then you'll vote on one. Then you can certainly have a new amendment, but to be open on the floor, only 2 amendments and the main motion open. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of parliamentary procedure. I will be here at the meetings to kind of talk through any questions that come up, but if you have a question in the meantime, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk about parliamentary procedure at any point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And I'm glad to know that you'll be here, or somebody from your staff will be here to help us if we run into any needs as we keep moving forward. But we're going to put it even further to the test. And next step for us is a review of our minutes from the October 22nd meeting. If anybody does not have those, let us know now. But you should have those in your email inbox, the minutes from the city staff. I think they came from Courtney, if you need to look for them. And does anybody need a few minutes to review those before we move forward? And I think, I don't know that I can see everybody on my screen, so don't hesitate to unmute yourself and let us know. Great. I think then we are ready to entertain a motion to move forward the minutes for approval.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Do we have a second to move the minutes from the prior meeting?
Second.
And so I will go through the roll call to ask for those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes from the prior meeting. Do you need to have the date in our vote? We're fine. Okay, great. Thank you.
I do just need to catch who was the second. I know it was a female voice, but I wasn't sure exactly which one it was. I looked down.
Cindy.
Okay, great. So I will go through the roll. And so I don't think Anne Marie joined us. So Deputy Burke,
Yes.
Ashley Hamilton,
Aye.
aye. Levy, think we can go with the thumbs up, right? Okay, good. Thank you. And Kathleen Jonathan,
I agree.
think I heard yes. Aye.
Aye.
Casey, thank you. Casey, yes.
Yes.
Cindy,
Aye.
aye. Scotty
Aye.
and Oni,
Aye.
and I too vote aye. And that will move forward our minutes, approve our minutes from our last meeting. So thank you all very much. And now, next up, Bob, I think you'll lead or help us, Bob, with those members from your staff who are going to talk through the initial observations so far with what you've been doing since the 22nd.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So we have been working very closely with Courtney and the support staff, getting ready for our first on-site. We spent a lot of time developing a list of the stakeholder groups, individuals we want to speak with and spend time with. We actually developed a framework of what a template would look like in terms of a schedule to help Courtney think about how to start organize some of the meetings. And that's why I think one of the 3 documents we sent on to the committee, right, Courtney? Is Courtney there? Or?
Yes, I am. I have 3 different screens.
I'm sorry.
An APB for my mouse. It's
Yeah,
all.
I just wasn't sure about the one document. I know we sent the other 2. I just wanted to make sure that was also among the packet that we sent on to the steering committee was the Stormman schedule that we had put together, right? That was okay.
Yes.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure.
While I'm off mute, I just want to notice that Kathleen is also going off screen for just a bit because she's dealing with something at home. So just notice that we do have more people than you can see on the screen.
Okay, great. Also, while we were doing our discussions, we actually had a team meeting with the support team and ourselves on October 29th. Did more of logistics, kind of presented some of the draft documents that were presented to the steering committee just to get some feedback, make sure we're moving forward. You'll notice both documents are still labeled as being draft because they're still kind of working documents that we're working on. The purpose of those documents is to give you all an opportunity to kind of give us some feedback to make sure we're right on target as far as the goals and objectives. And that's that one document that lays out the 6 basic questions that Jody identified in our first meeting. And then associated with each of those questions is a goal statement. And then the process we're going to go through to start to address each of those questions. It's part of the scope of work, and we just want to make sure that we have framed it out properly enough and included everything and didn't leave anything out, and that's what that document is for. We can walk through it if you'd like. Jody's up to you if we want to kind of walk through each of the 6 goals or leave it as it is. It's up to you.
So in my first glance, I think it might be good for us just to read through the first top 6 goals. Will we be reviewing those? We'll be confirming those as a group tonight. Is that what you're looking for?
No, what we're looking for is to introduce it to the committee, give the committee some opportunity to digest it, get some feedback from the committee, and then formalize the document more. This is one of a series of documents that are going to be coming out. The other document, which Brian's going to talk about in a little bit, is what we're calling our goals and strategies. This is more of an overview and overlay of the entire project, the key areas that we're going to be focusing on, and our methodology that we're going to be using to address each of those goals that are in the statement. So we can read through the 6 goals, and then there's a series of objectives, which are really the action items that follow on to how we're going to accomplish those goals, just kind of outlining it for each of the goals. So you will have an appreciation of how we're going to go about doing our work. Primarily, most of the work that we're going to be doing is in that first week. And what we're going to be doing is, as we're doing that work, we're going to start to develop the goals and strategies document, which is a lot more dense than this document. And Brian, you want to talk a little bit about the purpose of that secondary document, that it's still a working document that we're working on?
Sure. Yeah. And good evening, everybody. Well, not quite yet. I guess we're getting close, but yeah. And I just want to kind of clarify one thing on this overarching goals and objectives based on the questions. And I think, Jody, you said it best. We went back and we all reviewed your meetings that you had, and I think you captured it real well, where it's important to know where you've been or where you're coming from, because certainly I think you're all going to be shepherding through and entrusted not to just take a report and put it on someone's desk, but then to guide that through the process and make sure that whatever work we do aligns with what you're trying to accomplish and bigger to your community, to your stakeholders, and to your partners. So this first document you see here really does try to capture the essence of your group in relationship to this next phase we're going to go into, where we're really going to get specific with goals and strategies. So that document will be very closely aligned to the project goals, but we didn't want to dismiss or discount the importance and significance of the steering committee's work to make sure at the end we've started together as a team. And when I say that, all of us, and we end together as a team. So when you look at these questions in this document, those are going to be the ones that you identified as kind of the foundational pieces, I think, for the committee. And I also want to really stress that this is in no way concrete, that it can't be adjusted. Our team had a lot of discussion on this. Is just a start, certainly. So if we're going to miss a process or a strategy that would enhance this, that you certainly would like to recommend, this is kind of a guide for us, hopefully to be on the same page with the steering committee, the advisory committee, to make sure that now as we start doing the actual work, which we're going to do on site, will be the really heavy lifting, I think, for that first on-site visit, that we can move forward in a way that is understandable for us and certainly understandable to the different people we're going to meet with and to the committee. So the next document will be very specific to the different topic areas, whether it's the unsheltered and homeless, whether it's the BIPOC population, whatever that specific target area is, you'll see specific strategies for that particular goal or for that particular objective. So I would certainly encourage the advisory committee to look through this again, to make sure those are the 6 key foundational questions that are described clearly for us, that we're on the right track. So then we can certainly have a really good process when we get there, because as Courtney knows, we're going to be moving very quickly and for some pretty long days, but I think they will be significantly beneficial to us in helping to get to the final point where we want to get to.
Thank
Just
you.
to elaborate, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jody.
No, I just was going to say thank you and go ahead. Bob.
So the strategy document also accomplishes 2 main objectives. One, it talks about how we're going to go about doing that with overall strategy, but it's also going to identify deliverables, right? So you're going to see in that second document, which will probably come out after the on-site, and what we're intending to be our interim report to the city council. So the city council can see the overall strategy, can see the deliverables that we're planning on delivering for that December 14th meeting. So that's our base document leading up to that interim meeting with the city council on December 14th. You'll have it well in advance before we get ready to submit it. Make sure, as Brian indicated, this is a team project. So making sure that it really captures everything you want to see in the scope of the project. And then that's what we'll present to this city council as kind of a benchmark or a midpoint to say where we've been and where we're about to go in terms of marching towards March 16th in that working group meeting.
Okay, thank you. How about folks just check in for questions so far from steering committee members? Anyone? So if I would like to go through the document, how do folks feel about that? At least reading through the guiding questions and some of the goals. I'm missing a topic in there for myself, and so maybe talking it through might be helpful for some of us. How do folks feel about that? Walking through the document? Okay. I'm seeing yes. Thank you. So Bob, what would you prefer? I could go through and read the overarching guiding questions, or do you want your team to review? What works better for you?
We're pretty open to either way. I'm going to draft Ricky as part of this, so you just don't keep on hearing my voice. I told Ricky I wasn't going to really call on her, but I want to make sure she knows that she's going to get called on. So we'll recap. So the questions that
Bob, this is Courtney. I wonder if we want to, because there were two things that the group got in advance, the steering committee got in 3. One was this idea of all of the goals and objectives that you guys are trying to address. And another was sort of meshing the roles of each of the team members. I wonder if we can do it that way, talk about what goal areas from the perspective of the team lead.
So talk about the other document and then go back to this document, Courtney. Is that what you're suggesting, or?
I was just merging them. I was wondering if like the lead on the question about policies and tactics could address kind of how they're going to approach.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay. We're going to get a little bit organized here. So let me go with the 6 guiding questions just to make sure it's fresh in everybody's mind. So I'm going to get my glasses out here. Are the Salem Police Department's policies and tactics aligned with the city's council and community's values and expectations? What is Salem Police Department's capacity for community policing? How effective are Salem police officers in engaging with the Salem community members? How effective is Salem Police Department in engaging with youth and their families? Are the Salem Police Department's policies, tactics, and trainings biased or discriminatory? How effective are the Salem Police Department's policies, procedures, and practices in terms of establishing officer accountability? So those are the 6 guiding questions that Jody had identified in our first meeting, and where we have built off the company goals for each of those 6 questions. So with question 1, the goal is conduct a comprehensive review of selected Salem Police Department policies and tactics to evaluate the alignment of those policies and tactics with city, council, and community values expectations. And then as you look at the objectives, they outline that process and how we're going to go about achieving that process during answering or identifying that first goal. Brian, you want to add anything else to that at all? Good. Unmute yourself. Good. We can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think, and again, since this is a kind of a living, evolving document, right now we're anticipating what some of the things the department has in place, and we really won't know until we get on site to learn more about how they are tracking, how they are measuring different aspects of their operations and certainly policies. So I think when Bob was saying, here's the objectives, these are some of our initial approaches. And again, it's a little bit, when you look at, my first question is, well, how are you going to select the Salem Police Department's policies? Which one, that's going to be certainly, I think, a question from the community and from the department both. Why are you only selecting these policies versus other policies to evaluate? So I think it really is going to be critically important as we start looking at these policies and tactics that we get a broad spectrum or input from not only the department, but from community members and stakeholders as well. So again, when we get on site, I think we'll better have an understanding on how we're going to evaluate those. But one of the questions, the big questions, without going too far into this, our team has, well, how do you align these, or what's the purpose of aligning these or measuring these against community values and expectations? Well, as you know, in most cities across the nation now, that seems to be kind of the big question and the big challenges on tactics and policies, especially, and this is going to cross over, and again, I don't want to get too far into this, with mass gatherings and events involving kind of these emerging and evolving social challenges between police and community. So, I wish I had an easy answer at this point where I could say that, very clearly. But again, that first week, we're really going to have to sit down with those different representatives, again, the department representatives, community representatives, stakeholders, to really find out their perspectives on some of the things that aren't working, some of the things that are working. And then I think we'll have a better understanding on where we're going to go. And again, it has the interviews, but right now, without getting within the department to look specifically, again, we're going to have to use that first week to really get a good grasp on, what it is that we think are the pressing issues for the department. I think that's what you really want to see, is how are we going to address these pressing issues? Because obviously we can't review every policy and procedure, but we don't want to miss ones that need to be included from the community's perspective, from the council's perspective, and from the department's perspective. So it's a long answer for probably you were hoping a more direct question, but any questions on that? On the approach we're taking?
Go ahead and just unmute and ask your question if you could. I'm trying to watch for any of the committee members.
Hi, this is Ashley Hamilton. I actually had a question, not so much about the which policies and tactics, to look at. I think that was really well explained. I'm a little more curious about how you're defining and measuring community value. I see on objective number 1, you're going to be speaking to City Council, but in your overarching guiding questions, you say City Council and community value. So I'm wondering how you're going to gauge that with the community.
Bob, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, so and you'll see a little bit later in the framework, what we're trying to do, and again, keep in mind this first week is really foundational for us, is really speaking to a broader audience in terms of all the key stakeholders, all the key organizations, all the service providers within the organization. And what we're going to be looking for is what does that network look like? And is there connections between those networks? Are there some gaps that need to be addressed? And so it's really a learning opportunity for us to really see how different organizations define their key values, missions, and goals, and then seeing what those different key measures, goals, and then see where there's alignment, connection, or opportunities to build some cross-bridging between those organizations and greater collaboration, which comes later on in the process. But what we're trying to do is figure out what is the current state with respect to how do all these agencies work together. Where is there opportunities? Where is there maybe some duplication that could be actually leveraged to actually streamline some of the processes? And where are there opportunities to extend existing services? And who's best able to facilitate that? So that's really what we're looking at when we start to look at this. Actually, as we look at those different goals and values of those organizations, they are going to be different. We know that. And so we're trying to figure out is how do you get to that closer alignment, so that there is synergy between the various different stakeholders and service providers and people that are addressing various different issues in the community. That make sense?
It almost sounds like a SWOT analysis in other.
It really is, basically.
It really is what you're looking to do.
Yeah. It's really it's a little bit, as Brian said, it's a little bit complicated, it's a little bit dense, but that's what we're trying to do, is figure out, where is everybody coming from? How do they see their mission within the community of Salem, right? So it's not just governmental agencies, but it's also all the service providers, the schools, the hospital, everybody that's providing any level of service in the community, because we're trying to do is figure out, where are there opportunities to either bridge or build collaborations, and where we can actually support populations that are in need of services. And, getting to the final answer is, where are all those gaps that we need to identify for the city council in terms of what they need to be filling, right? I think that's the primary purpose here, is to figure out, is there a role for another infrastructure or another organization to link up all the different agencies.
Other questions? Cindy, please.
Thank you, Jody. Kind of a further question on this. You sound like we're looking at linking systems and linking providers, but when it comes to community values, how are we reaching out to the citizens to get that community value? Are we looking just to organizational structure and connectivity with services to serve the community?
No, so we later on, and you'll see in the objectives too, that we're proposing holding some town listening sessions, bringing focus groups together, and really trying to find a lot of community members from various different segments of the community and bringing them together to listen to them. We may not get to all of those in that first week because there's an awful lot of things we're trying to do just to start that foundation. But there are on that initial list some initial listening groups, but we're going to probably do a lot more of that during the second week when we come back to the community, once we have a better understanding of the community. Because what we want to do at that point in time is validate what we've been hearing in that first week, with other people's perspectives, right? So it could be any number of focus groups are having. Like we talked to Ashley about, bringing some folks in from the homeless population, or people who need to be sheltered, to have that conversation with them and listen to what their needs, concerns, and what they're looking for in terms of service providers. But that's very broad based, Cindy. So it really encompasses a lot of things are with the community. We just figured this is going to be a good starting point for us, and then working towards actually doing greater outreach. Almost like how you build a network. You start at the smaller hubs and nuclei of that, and then build out into that network.
If I may also just interject for a second too, the Hillard Hines team has done an amazing job researching everything that we know, or we think we know, as a city organization to represent the community values as well. So we have the strategic plan that's a fairly decent approximation of where people really want to see the city take action. And then we're in the middle of a strategic plan update right now. We are exhausting our community by asking so many times, what do you think, and how can we help shape the future from the land use and built environment perspective with the Our Salem planning effort, which really establishes a much broader vision for the community for a long, long time to come. We are out doing climate action outreach right now. We're getting lots of input there. And then we have this annual residential satisfaction survey, which is also great fodder for kind of getting the pulse of the community. So we have no shortage of input. And again, one of the fabulous things from a staff perspective, just with confidence in this team, is the amount of legwork that they've done in the beginning. And they're not asking for things that are easily available online. So it's great to have that kind of in-depth, in my opinion, view of our community.
If I could jump in here, because just what Courtney just said, to kind of piggyback with both Bob and Brian, there's a lot of things that just in the amount of things that I've already read as far as the survey, and there's a lot of things being done very well in Salem, and clearly the police department's doing a good job. And we're really looking at community policing as a whole. And like Bob said, it's about bringing, what can we do to better what's already happening and expand on it, and then perhaps give ideas of things you could do outside of what you're already doing, even as something as simple as a community advisory board, the youth, how better to engage the efforts on the things that are working, as also the things that maybe aren't working or aren't even in place, given ideas. But there's a lot of things. I just give kudos to all of you. There's a lot of things going well in Salem right now.
Which gives you a lot of potential to do a lot of great things, because it's not trying to fix broken systems, right? It's really about leveraging the strengths you already have and then moving them in a forward direction and building on that platform you've already have in place in Salem. So you're doing a lot of great work across the board. It's now trying to find opportunities where we can actually think about addressing some of the issues that I know that's been really confronting the police in terms of the whole non-criminal issues. Is that really a role for the police? And if not, who does in fact provide those services and stepping in? So that's kind of where we're going. And like I said, this is an exciting project because I think there's so much potential associated with it in terms of the outcome and the final product.
Other questions?
And
I have a
Jody,
couple. Oh, please.
I just wanted to say one thing too about when Bob was talking about, and I think the question with the community values, and I think, and I know we're going to rely on a lot of individuals in Salem, and I'll just use maybe Casey and Oni and as examples. You guys hear these stories, I would imagine, every day, with challenges, with things that you would like to see continuing efforts or reinforcements. And I think, or I'm hoping we can rely not only on your expertise in your areas, and that's where we're going to go with all of our interviews, hopefully, but you will give us individuals that you really think we need to hear their story, because, you know, there's a quantitative part to this project, but with community policing, as you know, there's a big qualitative part as well. And that's where I think we really need to bring both of those measurements together. I mean, it's one thing to quantify. When you look at performance measurements, I mean, it's basic. I mean, it traditionally is counting numbers or counting different, you know, elements going on, but we really want that qualitative component. So if you're already thinking, and hopefully most everyone is, who are those people that this team really needs to hear their story? And I think there's so much relevance in that. So while a lot of it will be looking at calls for service, looking at response times, all of those statistical elements, we need to really capture those qualitative stories and incidents to support all the work. Community policing, that's the essence and foundation of that approach. So I just wanted to, I know you all know that, but I just wanted to say that's going to be important to hear those stories, to get to those community values that aren't, you know, on an official list or aren't in a chart or in some, you know, formal context, but people have those and they can share those.
I'm curious on a couple topics. For example, the accreditation process. I know that the city of Salem has an accreditation process, and does that fit in as far as reviewing if that's been an effective process for the city, or if that's a resource-driven process that maybe needs to be revisited? Do you see that as any part of the audit that you'll be taking a look at?
So I think it goes very consistent with what we're talking about in terms of the alignment of policy procedure. Make sure there's a thread that runs through everything in terms of all the documentation. If there is a central philosophy, there is a central vision what the department's going to be doing, and that equally applies to the accreditation standards that are good. It's just really good roadmap or blueprint in terms of how a police department should be organized and managed. And there's a lot of flexibility in accreditation. Accreditation gives departments a great deal of latitude in terms of how they're going to address those whether mandatory requirements or optional requirements, but making sure that, again, there's alignment with everything that's going on so that the organization is operating holistically. There's alignment between all the functions within the organization, and that there is a clearly identified mission and vision for the department to be following through. So we talk a lot about community policing, and it means so many different things to many different people. The way you look at it is, what is that overencompassing role of the department? And is every aspect of the department on the same road or traveling the same direction, supporting what its core mission is? And that's where the accreditation principles come in as well. So yes, we'll be looking at that, but there may be some tweaking along with the policy procedures to make sure that they're aligning with whatever that new vision or mission is going to be in terms of the overall strategy plan at the back end of this entire process.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear you touch on a little bit, Ricky, on the community review board. And so I think that as you have more interviews with more teams, especially the Community Police Review Board that I also sit on, there'll be more to the conversation that comes with that. One other question I had was about training as a whole. I see training in the goals and objectives when it comes to our reviewing the training policies to see if there is any bias or discriminatory concerns, but are we reviewing training as a whole to the department? I guess it goes along the lines of the accreditation process. Are we looking for anything missing, anything that maybe we focus more time on than other departments? Are we gauging ourselves against a measurement of training as a whole? Does that come into play? I just want to make sure I really understand.
So I'm going to think about this for a bit. So when we talk about training and the bias and discriminatory practice, I'll give you an example. I've been recently working in a jurisdiction where it has been showing training films where every time they portray an incident, it involves an African-American perpetrator, right? And then you have people who are sitting in a room and there's no sensitivity to the fact that officers who may be of the same cultural background are upset about the fact the only people you're deploying here is folks of a similar cultural background, and the department wasn't even aware of the fact that it was sending the wrong message to its officers into the community. So it's things like that that are really trying to highly elevate the department's awareness in terms of just what's going on in the background, how they're doing the training, and also evaluating whether or not training is really achieving the kinds of goals you want it to, or is it becoming more perfunctory and really needs to be refreshed and revised, right? So again, as we think about possibly developing a new pathway for the police department, there's a whole series of trainings that need to take place to equip officers to move in that direction. And there may be specific training programs if the police department's going to take on an additional mission to equip the officers so they can be adept and proficient at that new mission they need to accomplish. Does that make sense, Jody?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm seeing that training as a whole will be taken a look at throughout many of these goals and objectives. So
Right.
I'll look to hear more as well.
I'd like to just interject on behalf of Levy from the chat.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Levy does have a question. He's specifically interested in the overarching guiding questions, item number 5, which in his view is referring to Salem PD policies, tactics, and trainings that are biased or discriminatory, much on the same topic that we're doing now. Would you be able, would you also be looking at how the policies are implemented in the field? Would that be part of your consideration as you dig into that question?
So that's a great question, and it's something we always do. We kind of look at what the department says it does, and then we go out and see if the department actually carries and fulfills that mission or the procedures that it claims it's doing, the procedures and policies. That many times, I don't think we're going to find this in Salem as much, but you go to a department that has policy procedures, but the officers aren't adhering to the policy procedures at all, and there's no accountability to make sure that they're following those policy procedures. So that is very much part of our assessment. That's why we're going to go out in the field with the officers just to see how they conduct themselves and how they carry themselves out. But comparing it back to the policy procedures, are they adhering to the established policy procedures, and are the policy procedures complete enough that they give the officer sufficient amount of guidance? So to Levy's question, the answer is a definite yes. We are going to make sure that what we read and what we've learned about the community, we actually see it in practice as it was intended. Go ahead, Ricky.
I was just going to add to that. So much of that a big part of training, like Bob said, it overlaps with accountability. The two go hand in hand in my estimation. And you really need to be able to look at both of them, because I'll just take body worn cameras for an example. You're going to need if you have body worn cameras, you need an entire policy and procedure around how to use them, when to use them, what's expected, and then you have to have the supervisory oversight. Any of those issues missing, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem with it. How's it spelled out? So you look at the policies to make sure it matches exactly what you want to do with it. Then where's the accountability piece? Where's the supervisory role in it? It's a big overarching thing when you start talking about training, because it encompasses all of that supervisory issue too that you were speaking to. So, I mean, it's so hard as a former chief, when I looked at policies and procedures, does it also match? Because the training that you're doing and the policies that come from it also end up matching that overarching goal, or are they meeting what the department's mission is and what the city of Salem wants? And it's not a cookie cutter thing.
I mean, one of the things we look for is, as the department identifies its missions and its values, is that thread running through every one of its policy procedures? Are they all connected to one another? And if they're not, then how do you get that alignment back in place again? And sometimes you'll see a mission in one unit is very different than the central mission of what you expect patrol to be doing, right? So if you're really thinking about a more community-centric view and approach and values, you may have units that their view of things is more to an end state, and that the community is just a means to that end state. So making sure you realign that back again with the central mission of the department. I'm not saying that's going on in Salem. I'm just saying that you see that quite often where, we basically have identified measures that we're using that cause inadvertent action. So for example, when you think about detectives, a lot of times what we measure detectives by is their clearance rate. So what are they preoccupied with? Solving those cases they can solve. And the ones they can't, they don't pay a lot of attention to. And so what happens to the victims in terms of who's advocating for them, who's making sure that they know something's going on? So it's those kinds of things where we are our measures kind of, you get what you measure, right? And sometimes and when you do that, you get unintended consequences or outcomes. And that's what we're looking for too, when we see how they're measuring things and, how are officers achieving those measurements or those goals that have identified for them.
Hello, this is Ashley. Just kind of jumping off of Levy's original statement. I definitely think policies and procedures have a role, and we definitely want to see how they're being implemented in the force. But I'd really like to know about the police departments and especially the individual officers, their ownership and accountability in reducing biases and discriminatory practices. Like where do they think it falls for them on a personal basis? So it's almost like your objective number 4, you could add another one that's very similar where it says conduct one-on-one interviews with the officers to better understand their involvement in working to prevent discrimination or bias within the department. So I'd like to see the officers and their personal ownership over the process as well.
No, that's great, Ashley. Thanks. We'll include that.
Thank you. And thank you, Levy, for putting the question in the chat. And Kathleen, if either of you do, I think staff are watching that and we'll watch for your questions, and we just will need to read them out loud so that they're for the record. But thank you. Any other questions or observations over this document? And would folks like to go through each one a little bit more?
Jody, can I ask a really quick question?
Please.
As I look through them, and maybe I missed it somewhere along the lines, but is there any focus on hiring and retention practices and any potential biases attached to those?
Good question, Deputy Chief, and it is contained in, it's in the objectives, so that's why you don't see it right away in the goals.
Under goal 3, I think.
Yeah.
Wait, that's the, yeah, it's number 2 and 3 of the objectives under goal 3, because that is something that I'm actually looking at, the recruiting, background, and retention, and not just from because how are you recruiting, where are you recruiting, how are we making sure that when we recruit for our police departments that we're recruiting the people who live in our communities first and foremost, and we're getting people that match our communities, and we have diversity in every aspect. And then how are we retaining them, which Salem Police Department has a very good retention. I mean, you guys don't seem to have a problem retaining people. People like working there. It's more, how do you better make your department match your city in the diversity with women, the whole works. And then how are you conducting your backgrounds again, which backgrounds for me, having done background in recruiting, background is a very big part, as I'm sure you know, Deputy Chief, it's a very big part of, if you don't have the right person backgrounding your potential candidates, a lot of everything else we've been talking about, from discriminatory, bias, all of that comes into play if they're not being backgrounded and taken in. So that's a big part of this, and it's focused in that goal number 3, I believe it was.
Thank you. That addresses that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Would the group like to go through and just take a moment with each one of these? Or have you had a chance to make sure your questions are answered so far?
And also just a reminder that this is still draft and there are plenty of opportunities to provide input. And so we don't have to, for all of it today.
We're also going to tell you that I can guarantee you that when we start to do our on-site, we're going to be identifying other objectives as we start to do our investigation and start to just really learn about the community. So there are going to be things that are going to continue to have this document grow to a certain degree, but also more importantly, feed the goals and the strategy document that we're working towards. So this other document that's in the background, which you haven't seen yet, because we're not ready to release it to prime time yet, because we're still working on it. But we do, in fact, want to share it with you after our first onsite, because we'll have a better insight as to the community and the things that are going on, and start to take shape, because that's a document we want to work on towards that interim report in December.
All right, good. Well, knowing that, why don't we just ask for folks to take the time to walk through these now that we know a little bit more, and we can offer feedback to Courtney and she can share it. But it sounds like we'll also be revisiting these in 2 weeks, again and again, as we keep moving forward. Does that sound fair to the group? Great. You have other materials, Bob. Did you want to walk through some of that material?
So the other document you're going to see there is the way we've kind of divided the topics among ourselves. And when you look at the topics, although I may have identified Ricky as a lead on some of the topics, we're going to be working in tandem with one another because some of them are very large, right? So, and plus, if you start to look at our areas of focus, they actually, and we want them to connect with one another. So we want to make sure that they're connecting and they're aligning with one another very quickly. So, you know, Ricky, why don't you run through the ones that you're going to be looking at, and then that's how we'll kind of go through it and see if there's any questions. But you'll see under each topic area, very specific subcategories that are associated with those topics.
Sure. So I have officer wellness and safety, which is a big passion of mine. And it encompasses a lot of different areas that not just with equipment, because equipment is a big part of officer wellness and safety. When you start talking about, do they have the proper, vests? Do they, body worn cameras come into that? Do they have, less lethal tasers? When you look at the different equipment that's available to officers today to help make some of the encounters that officers have in the field be a little more advantageous to the outcomes we want to see in our communities. And that starts with the early intervention system, which most of those of us in law enforcement have known for a long time to be early warning systems. And to Scotty, because I believe you're part of the union part, right? Am I correct in that? Yeah. So when you look at that, it's also, how do you work with telling officers that an early intervention system is for their own good? Because you're not looking, these should never be looked at as a gotcha, because I'll be honest with you, if we don't have officers out in our cities that are well themselves, because they see a lot of things that people don't see on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of the things that are happening in the news today and how we're perceived, and that weighs on them. So you have to have systems in place, not just within the police department, but in the city as a whole, to make sure that there's screening done. And part of that is these early intervention systems. What happens if you have a really good police officer who all of a sudden never called in sick, and all of a sudden he's calling in sick a whole bunch of times? He's late. Are we starting to look at problems before they become problems and it's a simple thing as reaching out. So that's where you get into that, and you really work with the unions to help, push this, because it should never be about trying to get people in trouble. It should be about helping them and getting to the matters of the issues that affect us before it reaches a point where we're getting in trouble. It goes with peer support, the whole critical incident stress management, EAP, a wellness program, which isn't just working out and lifting weights and running, as much as, if people need help. We all have our issues in our families, kids, marriages, having that support system that people can talk to, and then getting down to equipment. And then I'm also, as I already spoke to, recruiting, hiring, background, investigation, and retention. We already spoke a little bit about that, but also what ways can we get the officers at Salem to be more involved in recruiting? Is there incentives that we can give them? I know in San Jose Police Department, we would give 40 hours broken out over a time for officers to, as nobody knows the community better than the officers who are interacting with them. They see the potential candidates in the schools, everywhere else. So what kind of incentives are being given to them to help with the recruiting efforts? And how do you broaden that recruitment efforts? And then youth engagement, another big passion of mine. You have a school resource officer program. You have DARE. How is all of that working? And again, going back to the SWOT, that strengths, weaknesses, and objectives, and all of that working. Basically, I like to say what's working, what's not working, and what can we improve on? How do you improve upon it? And I know, because I understand, and part of what I'm going to be doing is talking to the school district too, because I know there's some hesitation about school resource officers. I would tell you, as somebody who spent 12 years in the schools, you have to have the right person in the schools. That's the bottom line. So how do you choose what officers work in schools, and are you working with the schools? Because there probably is no better place for officers to reach kids than in the schools, but you got to have the right people. You can't put a square peg in a round hole. So it's part of that. And also looking at some of the different community-based is there PAL? I'm not even sure. These are the questions we'll be asking, but services for the youth. And then I'm working with Bob with the homeless and unsheltered persons, which also is a big topic. And there's a lot of things from, Ashley, the arches and a lot of the other programs, and getting into the cahoots and asking a lot of questions about where some of the interaction and collaborativeness can be improved or expanded upon, as the case may be, those type of things. And that's it for my topics.
You think?
I think, yes.
Brian?
Yeah, and like Bob said, ours is going to be, I think all of these are going to merge together. We're going to cross over in specific areas. So I think my areas that I'm going to be looking at is some of the data collection and data analysis components. And I know it was brought up, I think in one of your meetings, your previous meetings, the question for the chief was, are we tracking the homeless? How are we tracking that as an example? So looking at how that's being done. And so I think we'll start looking at what's currently available for the police department. But I think also there was a part of this is the systems approach with city services. So multi-dimensional, certainly. So we want to look at the connectivity between those as well. So we're going to look at, I hit briefly earlier on the collection, as far as the quantifying specific data. That's the numbers. That's the different calls for service responses, and then the qualitative part. So as you start going more into this, we want to look at what are their measurement benchmarks or standards. Are they just looking at the quantitative stuff? What's in place? So it's really going to look at the processes and systems that are currently available. But again, not just for the PD. I think we really want to connect that because I think one of the part when you look at analyzing data or trying to quantify or qualify that, what the department thinks is a successful resolution may not be for the fire department, for the hospital. So again, I think we're going to look specifically at some of your target areas in the proposal and look at how we can maybe make recommendations and show improvements on how you can maximize the resources and partnerships that are available.
So my areas are really the overarching community policing engagement. What does that look like? How is it connected? Where are there opportunities where the community or the police department is doing active outreach to the community and building those relationships, building those partnerships? What are the measurements it's using to assess how successful it is in terms of doing those things? It's more than just having one-off events, but really thinking about an overall strategy that if we're going to do something, it's really with an objective in mind. And did we achieve that or get to that objective in the process? So really moving away from, and I'm not sure Salem does this, but other departments that just do what I call event counting versus management of events. Using events for the purpose of building those relationships, building confidence in the police, particularly in communities that have not had really good interaction with the police, or the police really haven't penetrated far enough into those communities, and really seeing that as a way to kind of do its own self-assessment and then also have outward outcome measures in terms of that process. So that's a big area, and it really has a sub area in terms of really looking at the BIPOC populations in the communities and what are those special efforts they're making to reach out to those communities that may have not felt like they're part of the mainstream of the overall community, and making sure that they feel welcome and they feel that they have equal access to the police and what are the things that they're doing. So that's a secondary area that I'll be focusing on during my research. I'll be looking at the use of force policy, be looking at how that review process works, what do they do with that information that they collect it, what are the analytics that are associated with it, how they use it in terms of assessing every quarter or every half year or year in terms of trends and analysis in terms of where their use of force going, and if it is starting to go up, why is it going up, and what are the things we need to do to bring it back down into a certain level. So really using data and analytics to help them understand that phenomena and making sure they keep track of it, because it is so vital that the police really understand where use of force is tracking, why it's taking place, and then looking for opportunities to reduce it or eliminate it altogether. And then the other thing is the interactions between the behavioral health crisis, and that's an area that I'm particularly interested in, that I've worked very closely with in terms of my own work, in terms of really thinking about how do we build a holistic and support network around folks that really need those kinds of services. especially if there are broken systems that are really not providing adequate services, and really trying to figure out how you fill those gaps. And in some cases, actually be part of that network in supporting folks, because they come back to the community. And then having that trust to want to be able at 2 o'clock in the morning, if I'm really feeling anxious, or I'm really feeling upset, or I feel like I'm going to crisis again, feel safe enough to be able to reach out to the police, to go there and know that they're going to be there as a stabilizing force, a helping force, as opposed to not knowing what's going to happen and putting you in deeper fear. So really looking at that whole network of systems, and what do they look like and how they're connected. The last area is a colleague of mine, that's Bob Bomer. He's been doing a lot of work around crowd control, and he's been also doing a lot of work around making sure that we protect protesters' rights, and making sure the police really are involved in a productive way when there's protests and demonstrations taking place, to make sure that the protesters and demonstrators do in fact reach their objectives, and that the police are not only there to protect everybody that's involved in the protest, but making sure they can really achieve what they need to do and exercise their rights for free speech and being able to do the demonstration. So Bob's going to be using or doing that. You probably won't see a lot of Bob, because that's more of a document review, but he may come out. And the other thing I was going to ask the deputy chief about was, if there are any after action reports, any recent demonstrations or events that you had, or operational plans, we'd like to be able to get our hands on that. I think I may have submitted that request to Courtney. I did. She's nodding yes. Okay. So you'll be seeing it coming your way. But that's the follow-on. Bob does in fact have your operational guide, and he's been going through it. So now we just want to compare that operational guide to any plans that you've developed, and any after action measures you've taken after an event that's taken place, for the purpose of enhancing how you continue to respond in the future, those kinds of things. There's two areas that I didn't see, and I feel I want to make sure that we haven't inadvertently overlooked them. That's those folks suffering from addictive behaviors. Who's providing service to folks when they're suffering from addiction and things like that, and really getting connected to the services they need to. That wasn't in the scope of work, but there is a crossover between some of the other populations that we're working with, that I think is a population I don't want to leave out unless there was a particular reason why that wasn't identified in the scope of work. And then other special community groups or interest groups like the LGBTQ populations, and figuring out if that should be another group of folks that we should be kind of listening to, understanding what they'd like to see in terms of services, how welcome they feel in the community, and what their relationship is with the police department. And again, I'm not trying to create more work for ourselves, but I know those were two areas that I was just kind of curious about, as to whether or not you want us to kind of probe into those as well.
Thanks. Sorry, I think I just froze. Am I back with you?
Yes, you are.
Good. Any thoughts, conversation about what Bob is just talking to us about? And I've lost my view of all of you, so. Go ahead.
This is Ashley here. I can definitely confirm for the Arches focus group with the unsheltered population, we've been really thoughtful on who we're inviting to that meeting, trying to be representative, at least within the unsheltered population, of the LGBTQ community, youth, BIPOC, mental health and addiction issues are kind of just sprinkled in there. So I think you're going to get a really good snapshot, at least the unsheltered population at that meeting. But I would definitely second that a larger conversation for the community at whole, maybe communicating with PCC. There are local crisis unit, local crisis center, and or addiction services with Bridgeway, to kind of get their insight on, how police engagements with their clientele, or even with them sometimes. And then I have a couple other categories. And so when it's a good time, or as far as like other possibilities to reach out to, I don't know if you want me to say that now, later, or if in an email to Courtney would be more appropriate later.
Now is great.
Yeah, I think now would be great, Ashley, please. Thank you. That was good feedback and observation. I guess just before we leave the conversation a little bit further, any other comments on what Bob was discussing about the different communities that he would recommend? I would suggest, yes, if you're seeing a gap in information that you've done for other groups, yes, please include those groups as you keep moving forward. And it sounds like Ashley will be offering some opportunities, but
I think also when you're talking about mental health and those types of things, obviously Anne Marie is on this committee and unable to make it today, but we also have those multi-jurisdictional officer teams with qualified mental health professionals. So those collaborative units, so the different law enforcement agencies and Marion, that would be a great service to talk about that work and what they're seeing. And
yeah, good.
That's good, Cindy, because we're also, we are going to be looking at all the MOUs and MOAs that exist between Salem Police Department, or I'm assuming some of those collaborative groups or have those kinds of agreements between themselves, but we'll be looking at those as well. So that's been identified in the goals and objectives document.
Good. Ashley, please go forward.
Okay, well, I don't want to be too presumptive because I think you guys actually cover a lot of wonderful subpopulations in your team assignments. So I think you're definitely being aware and recognizing just the diversity that Salem has. And I think you had made a comment that there's a secondary framework coming out for next week. So I don't want to, imagine that this is just it. So some of it might be redundant. But you make reference to wanting to speak to the BIPOC community. And this week, I only see mono a mono listed. So I didn't know if you needed some additional connections to BIPOC service providers or community members.
Yeah. I think we have the NAACP and a couple other organizations that we wanted to identify early on, some advocate groups. But no, we don't know the world of the different communities that are in Salem, and that's one of the things we're going to be looking for and learning about when we get there. And that's why we've been saving that second week too, so we don't miss anybody. I want to make sure that we're very careful not to miss folks and make sure people have a voice in this process. So no, I appreciate it, and that's why we're looking to you guys to help us think about, where are the holes and where do we need to be going, because the community, right? So who we need to be speaking with, and we're really relying upon you to kind of be our guides in this whole process.
Yeah, I also think that starting with the Human Rights Commission too, I think they'd be a great place to kind of circle back.
I think we have a meeting set up, if I'm remembering correctly, Courtney.
That one's going to be November 12th. It just works better. It's not going to be during the first site visit, but Bob, you just made a reference to several more site visits that are coming. So that kind of, to me, lends back to that phrase snowballing that you were referring to earlier. So it's that tell two friends model. So this is perfect. So we can start queuing up some conversations for your site visit. But let's take all the ideas, please.
Yep.
And I think my last comment, I'll leave the floor. My last comment is the business community. I'd really like to see them represented in these conversations. So maybe someone from
I think that's under goal number 6. We're going to be reaching out to them as well specifically. And we're also going to be talking to the neighborhood association chairs. That was another group. So when I was talking to you one-on-one, I was very fastidious about taking notes in terms of when you mentioned things. So you'll see we captured a lot of those organizations that you had mentioned during our conversation and the ones you sent on to Courtney and the follow-up. But that's what Courtney refers to, that snowballing effect. We'll keep on looking for that as well. Ashley, what's PCC stand for? I'm assuming the Crisis Center. What's the P stand for?
I think it's Psychiatric Crisis Center.
Oh, okay. Just curious. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just, I know you said PCC, and I figured that. Got it.
Well, Anne Marie would know way more than me, but she'd be a great contact when she's here.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Can I just repeat what I think I've heard? I've heard interest in connecting with the Psychiatric Crisis Center, Bridgeway, getting some maybe focused ride-alongs. I'm going to infer, Cindy, with the multi-jurisdictional teams that are out in Marion and Polk County. Better connections with BIPOC community and our business community. Any other ideas or suggestions?
I heard it mentioned youth, and Ashley, I'm not sure, being the adult population as well as the youth population, but But we do have, I see Northwest Human Services on here, so meeting with them and Home Youth Services. Those are at-risk youth as well as homeless and unaccompanied youth. That combining those two populations for a conversation, that's that core group.
I think we have Taylor House on the list too. I think somebody mentioned Taylor House.
Taylor's House and Home Youth Services, it's the same program.
Okay.
Home Youth and Resource Center is the day center, and Taylor House is the open shelter. So yeah.
Good feedback. Anyone
I guess
else?
that's a great point of clarification. Bob, how would you prefer to dissect these conversations? I've invited home youth to the Arches focus group on the 18th. With Cindy's recommendation, maybe it's better to do a conversation with Host and Home. Host and Home, so Northwest Human Services, because they're of the same subpopulation. So it's really your preference.
No, it's really your best advice to us. So, what makes the most sense in terms of, again, I just don't want to lump groups together for the sake of lumping the group. I want to be very clear that there's very specific audiences that we're talking to, and make sure we're respectful of that as well. So what do you think is the best combination without just pushing a bunch of people together that you think are going to have like issues or like concerns or, are really going to be kind of a synergy with one another? I think that'd be great. Don't want to have a battle on our hands because there's a conflict in the room. So, whatever you think works well.
Yeah, I would. I was looking at conversations pending confirmation, and you have the NAACP board. I also would like to add that I think it's important to have the Black community leaders, because everybody is not a part of the NAACP, but they definitely are affected by some issues that are happening.
Bonnie, is there an association, or is it just a loose net connection of people that are? We would hope you would help us figure out who we need to contact.
I can do that. There's some identified groups that I am connected to that would be good points of contact to talk to about.
Yeah. The other group we didn't hear about that we hear in some communities, primarily in the South, I think later, are the clergy and the religious leaders. And I'm not sure if that's another group of people you'd want us to be talking to as a focus group as well.
Absolutely. I am absolutely the clergy. I was gonna say clergy, but then I just put it a different way, but that's what I meant.
Okay.
There are several pastoral associations where you can get multi-denominational groups together and talk to the clergy as a unified group.
That'd be great. Cindy. That sounds great.
And Bob, do you have the department, I'm not sure if I'll have the acronym right, the Board of Standards Training, actually, Scotty, can you help me? DPSST, which is called something else now. Am I?
Oh, sorry. Is it called something else? Department of,
Is it?
Yeah, you're right. Standards and training. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. Do you have them on your list as far as talking to the leadership about observations or?
No, we haven't. So is that the statewide training certification agency?
Yes.
Okay. No, we'll just add that to the list as well.
Yeah, they are.
Thinking about it, we didn't extend ourselves out to the state. So there may be state agencies and youth service agencies that are on the state level we haven't thought about too, that we need to touch base with. So that would be helpful as well. I mean, we did a lot of work with DYS and DFS in Massachusetts, and they were a great resource to us. But they're state agencies, you don't think to go to them. But we found we had the same clients that we were working with, and they were working with too. So it'd be interesting to see how there's some collaboration going on with state agencies as well.
So I just need to represent some of the comments in the chat, please. Levy is reminding me and us that the Mano a Mano group will also have some youth participation. So it's not just for more clarification about the extent of the group. And then Kathleen's adding in that she would like us to consider Micronesian groups and connecting with the COFA Alliance, the national network. So those are also things we'll add into into the list. Thank
An
you.
Indigenous group, I know that there was a presentation made at the last city council meeting. Is that sort of based in Salem? And is there a group or network we could be talking with as well? Because that's part of the BIPOC population.
So the reference is to the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. We did a proclamation to recognize Indigenous folks. And they do have some, there's some, we'll work on that.
Okay. I meant to get the name of it. I just, I didn't go back and pick it up when I was watching the video.
I think that in Oregon, our DHS, our Department of Human Services, has our Child Welfare Department in it. I believe there's probably members on the Marion County Public Safety Coordinating Council, but we can confirm with Anne Marie. And I am realizing we're closely getting to 6 o'clock. That was a really good discussion. So I do want to try to wrap us up at the same point of making sure everybody has their comments heard for the discussion tonight. Is there anything else, Bob, that you want to make sure that we cover tonight so that you can keep moving forward?
Just a reminder that we're going to be looking for some feedback on our goals and objectives document. And then if there are more groups and organizations that you think that really are important to the work that we're doing within the scope of work that we're doing, please send that and share that with Courtney as well. We may not get them this upcoming trip, but we will, obviously put them, getting them set up for that second week that we come back. And also there's virtual meetings we'll be doing in between. So, the other thing we do is I don't want people waiting until December 7th before that we can talk to them, especially if their intent is for us to speak to us virtually. We can do that all the time, anytime during between those two meetings as well. So I want to take advantage of not waiting and then missing opportunities to speak to folks before we come back that week. Because I just want to, because I know this week what we're going to have a problem with is we're not going to get to everybody we put on the list for Courtney.
Right.
And she's been, really working on unbelievably to get everybody organized, but it's virtually impossible. We told Courtney it's virtually impossible to get everybody that we listed in that first week.
That was a challenge. I'm on it. I do just want to take a quick moment before we break. I have been asked a couple questions outside of these meetings, and I want to make sure that I address for a minute some of the questions. So I think we've talked about how these meetings are really for the purpose of you all having an opportunity to contribute and guide and shape the focus of the audit. We're not, as you may have noticed, including public comment on the agenda. I want to just make sure that it's clear these meetings are visible and there's access to them over YouTube as we're doing right now. The agendas are posted on our city pages, and so those are available, as including the materials from the meetings. In terms of participation and weighing in on the recommendations, we're really saving that for when the audit work itself is complete. People are welcome to email in comments, and I'll share them with you as they come in. But really, the intent is to engage the council for those kinds of broader participation conversations about the audit findings and recommendations, and try to really kind of preserve the audit as a true investigation into all the details and keep it as objective as we can. And then when the findings and recommendations are presented in a work session with the City Council on March 16th, as well as in December and with this update on December 14th, that's where we're really inviting council and community comment into the process. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. I think we talked about it last time, but that's again the approach that we're taking in terms of keeping this process visible and access to it, but also having the participation and invitation to really weigh in on the findings towards the end of the process. So thank you for that. Natasha, did you have something to say about public records? Excellent.
Yes, I'm sorry. Jody had asked that I just make a couple of comments to all the committee members. Just kind of just a reminder, if you had not ever participated in a similar group before, because you are volunteering on behalf of the City of Salem and your group will be advising the City Council, your notes and communications could be considered public records if we received a request for any records or any and all communication by this committee. And so if you are sending emails to each other, include Courtney as a CC so that it can be retained on the city system. Otherwise, you would be responsible for retaining those emails and that communication and your notes if we ever received a request for those. So if you have any questions, I can answer them now, or you can email me or call me offline if you'd prefer. But just kind of a brief note, be mindful of the fact, please, that these are public, that your written communications are public records, and so you should retain them. And then we can talk about retention kind of towards the end of the work that you do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Do reach out. We will make sure Natasha's contact information is in the minutes because it was part of the presentation that we'll get as well. Quick question I have, if any members would like to attend any of the meetings that you have on the list, is that a possibility? Do we reach out to Courtney and let her know so that we can find out the particulars? Yes, I think that's a yes. And
Yes,
anyone
please.
is welcome to do that. That's on the steering committee, and I would encourage it. But and it sounds like some of you are also setting those up. So thank you for all the work everyone's doing. Please, Cindy.
Madam Chair, can I, is it possible to get an agenda and the time and location, and, or are these all Zoom? I'm not sure, but then.
It's so crazy.
I'm sure it is.
Kinds of things. It's really at the purview of the group that we're inviting ourselves to to participate with. So so it's all over the place, and certainly I can try. I've got just 2 or 3 more to set up, but I will, for those that are bigger focus group conversations, I'll put together the list and try to make those available.
What might be good just for us to sit and hear is maybe a recommendation that 1 or 2 of us would attend each, and that, you know, we're not all showing up to several to be overwhelming the initial conversation.
So Cindy, and I guess regarding this this part of the conversation, I think it'd be great for, like for me, I would love to be able to show up for some of these, some of the focus groups. But my concern is that, given that I'm attached to the police department, would that then kind of hamper the direct conversations or the dialogue? And I certainly wouldn't want to take away from that, but I'd also like to be present if that's something that actually seems like it would be doable for all of us.
Is there a preference, Bob, from your team?
I would defer to the folks that are helping us organize the focus groups to give us some advice as to whether that, you know, that wouldn't bother the group to have the deputy chief there, or it might be prudent not to have him there. But I would look to them to help us understand. But I, as far as I'm concerned, if the group doesn't mind, I'd love to have them at the meetings. So.
And I would just add to that, because when you want to have good, meaningful conversation, you know, especially when you're talking, and the deputy chief knows this, and you have subordinates with, especially within the police department, they're not going to be as open, and you want to get the best information that you can, and you want people to talk, and you have to be mindful of who's in the meeting as to how much they're going to participate. So that would be the only thing we'd have to think about.
Right. And my point here was that I wouldn't want it to be seen as disrespectful if we chose not to attend, but I do think that our attendance would actually probably thwart the conversation. And I really don't want to do that. I want these to be meaningful, because it's not going to move forward. We're not going to get meaningful recommendations if people don't feel comfortable making their statements.
And I think some of the dynamics of the group would really appreciate the police being there, because it shows a sincere interest in terms of what's going on. But, you know, as you point out, Deputy Chief, there may be some groups that, and Ricky points out that would, you know, want to, you know, not feel, not that you would do anything with the information, but just wouldn't feel open enough to be able to speak about it.
So how about I try this approach? So what I'll do is I'll put together a list of the days and times, and I'll identify whether or not there's already one of you expected to participate. And then you guys, first come, first serve, can jump on it, and we'll try to limit participation of steering committee members to maybe 2, because some of these groups are going to be 6 to 8, and some of these groups maybe as large as 25. So looking for a way to kind of balance, it totally sucks as a city staffer to be, to overwhelm the community participation. So maybe we'll just try to limit to 2 or 3, and I'll notice where there is someone of you participating, and we'll just go from there.
That sounds like a good recommendation. Anybody have any comments on that recommendation? Okay, great. Thank you. We'll look to hear more from you, Courtney. All right, so we are scheduled to meet again on November 19th. Sounds like we'll be doing some work much work between now and then, and several of us will be involved in some of the meetings. And it is our job now to provide you some feedback in between now and then if anything is missing on the list that we spoke about today, or if you have observations and feedback on the goals and objectives list that was sent out. So I'm just saying everything goes to Courtney, and then Courtney, you'll help us get it through. Okay.
Yes.
Is there anything else anyone wants to cover before we talk about adjourning? Nope. I can't see everybody at once, so make sure you unmute and let me know if I'm not seeing you. All right. Well, I think then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make the motion to adjourn the meeting of the Citizens Community Policing Performance Audit.
Thank you, Cindy. We have a motion from Cindy to adjourn in a second.
I can second.
Deputy
That's
Burke.
George.
Thank you. And so all those in favor can raise our hands. There we go. Anyone opposed? Any last comments? Great. And I see a thumbs up from Levy. Now I finally saw the thumbs up. So thank you all very much. And thank you so much for the work that you're going to be doing over the next course of the couple weeks. We'll have a lot to talk about when we get back together on the 19th. So take care.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.